American author and screenwriter Ray Bradbury is one of the most celebrated 20th century writers, having worked in a variety of styles including science fiction, fantasy, horror and mystery. He wrote more than 400 short stories and almost 50 books during his career that covered 70 plus years, as well as producing poems, essays, plays, operas, teleplays and screenplays, making him one of the most productive writers of his time. His most lasting stories include The Martian Chronicles, The Illustrated Man, The Golden Apples of the Sun, Fahrenheit 451, The October Country, Dandelion Wine, A Medicine for Melancholy, and Something Wicked This Way Comes. The New York Times named Bradbury the writer most responsible for bringing modern science fiction into the literary mainstream. Bradbury's writing was reportedly sparked by an encounter with a carnival magician, Mr. Electrico, in 1932. At the end of Electrico's performance, he reached out to the 12-year-old Bradbury, touched him with his energy-charged sword and commanded, "Live forever." Bradbury later said, "I decided that was the greatest idea I'd ever heard. I started writing every day and I never stopped." Owing to his impaired eyesight, Bradbury was rejected for induction into the military during World War II, so instead he began his writing career. Having been inspired by science fiction heroes such as Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers, Bradbury began to publish science fiction stories in fanzines in 1938. In the mid-1940s, Bradbury's stories started to appear in major magazines such as the American Mercury, Harper's and McCall's. He was unusual in that he was being published in pulp magazines such as Planet Stories and Thrilling Wonder Stories, as well as what they called slicks, such as The New Yorker and Collier's. Although Bradbury was often considered a science fiction author, he said his only science fiction book was Fahrenheit 451. Strictly speaking, much of his work was fantasy, horror, and mystery. He said, "I use a scientific idea as a platform to leap into the air and never come back." In 1950, The Martian Chronicles were first published, a series of short stories depicting Earth's colonization of Mars, leading to the extinction of an idyllic Martian civilization. In the face of an oncoming nuclear war, many of the settlers returned to Earth, and after Earth's destruction, a few surviving humans returned to Mars to become the New Martians. The short story collection, The Illustrated Man, published in 1951, included one of his most well-known stories, The Veld, in which a mother and father struggle with their technologically advanced home taking over their role as parents, and their children becoming uncooperative because of their lack of discipline. Interestingly, Bradbury's short story The Rocket Man from The Illustrated Man inspired the hit song of the same name. Lyricist Bernie Taupin said he was so enthralled by the way the story portrayed the work of astronauts as an everyday job that he took the idea and ran with it. His songwriter partner Elton John apparently loved the lyrics, and the tune came quickly. Bradbury's novel Fahrenheit 451, published in 1953, is widely regarded as his greatest work. It depicts a future society where books are prohibited. The protagonist is a fireman whose job it is to burn books, but one day he takes a book instead of burning it and is seduced by reading. Fahrenheit 451 has been acclaimed for its anti-censorship themes. Something Wicked This Way Comes, published in 1962, is a dark fantasy novel about two 13-year-old friends and their terrifying experience with a travelling carnival. The novel combines elements of fantasy and horror and sets out to examine the contradictory natures of good and evil that exist within all individuals. The title is taken from a line said by the witches in Shakespeare's Macbeth, "By the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes." During the 50s to the 70s, Bradbury emerged as a principal futurist through his stories, books, articles and lectures. As a result, Bradbury received many recognitions. In his honour, the Apollo 15 crew named a moon crater Dandelion, an asteroid was designated 9766 Bradbury, rocks on Mars were named The Martian Chronicles, and the Phoenix Mars lander carried a digital copy of The Martian Chronicles aboard when it travelled to the high northern latitudes of Mars. Valles Marineris, one of the deepest chasms of the Martian Grand Canyon, has reportedly been unofficially renamed the Bradbury Abyss by his fans. In 2012, just 10 weeks after Bradbury's death, the rover Discovery's touchdown point on Mars was renamed Bradbury Landing. During the 1970s, Bradbury no longer wrote short fiction at the same pace as his younger counterpart. Instead, he turned his energy toward poetry and drama. Earlier in his career, he sold several mystery short stories, and he returned to the genre with Death is a Lonely Business, published in 1985. In 1979, Bradbury hosted and co-wrote an ABC News special on space exploration, Infinite Horizons: Space Beyond Apollo, for which he won an Emmy Award from the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences. He also adapted 59 of his short stories for the television series The Ray Bradbury Theatre between 1985 and 1992. Late in life, Bradbury retained his dedication and passion, despite what he described as the devastation of illnesses and deaths of many good friends. Among the losses was the death of Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry, who was an intimate friend of Bradbury's. Bradbury suffered a stroke in 1999 that left him partially dependent on a wheelchair. Despite this, he continued to write, and even wrote an essay for The New Yorker about his inspiration for writing, which was published only a week prior to his death. Bradbury was bestowed many accolades, including the World Fantasy Award for Lifetime Achievement, the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America Grand Master Award, and the Bram Stoker Award for Lifetime Achievement. In 2007, Bradbury received a Pulitzer Prize citation, recognizing his prolific and deeply influential career. We are cups, constantly and quietly being filled. The trick is knowing how to tip ourselves over and let the beautiful stuff out.